got selected on the tour to India, which was a really surreal experience. I remember getting to the airport and I got my suit for the first time and was really excited to enjoy my first England blazer and realised that they'd got the sizes wrong and I was wearing Chris Tremlett's blazer. So very quickly it was like bang, straight back down to earth. And Graham Swan's first interaction with me, I'd never met him before, obviously a big hero of mine, was him just wetting himself with laughter.
Welcome to the Mindflick podcast. The Mindflick podcast explores the psychology of high performance. Every episode, we will sit down with leaders, athletes, and change makers to uncover the turning points, the pressure moments, and the crucial experiences that define their journey. I'm Sir Andrew Strauss, chairman of Mindflick.
And I'm Pete Lindsay, performance psychologist and co-founder at Mindflick. And we'll be taking you inside the mindset shifts that have shaped some of the best minds in both sport and business. And we'll blend that thought leadership with real life stories, bringing performance psychology to life in a way that's practical, human, and impactful.
Joining us on today's episode is none other than Joe Root, the legend that is Joe Root, England's greatest run scorer of all time, closing in on being the greatest run scorer in the history of the game, but more importantly, just a brilliant person who thinks deeply, not just about batting and cricket, but about life and perspective. And I think all of that comes across very strongly in this episode.
Yeah, his turning points that he shared throughout his career really kind of speak to that idea of adapting, of shifting mindsets, and of kind of letting go of something in order to get hold of something bigger, if you like. So yeah, a fascinating episode for you all.
Joe Root, a very warm welcome to the Mindflick podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you with us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
For our listeners, it is worth saying that Rooty and I never played cricket together at all, but we did attend a training camp. Do you remember that, Rooty, in India before what was my final tour as an England player? And I remember speaking to Rooty a couple of times and I thought, God, this guy's a bit of a cricket tragic, like a young guy trying to make his way in the game. It'll be interesting to see how well he does. And then it really has been a pleasure, Rooty, to see the incredible run that you've had and trajectory, firstly getting into the England team, and then, we're going to talk about it later, but really being probably our greatest player ever and knocking the door to be the greatest run scorer in the history of the game. So it's been an amazing thing to watch from the outside. You've also disproved my point, my very sort of deeply held conviction that anyone who's the genuinely best in the world at what they do has some sort of screw loose or something like that.
I just hide it better than most. But
maybe you do, and maybe we'll unearth that later. But mate, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Let's start with your first turning point. We talk a lot about these turning points, these impactful moments in your life that maybe make you see the world in a different way, or certainly change your perspective of how the world works, or even how you work. So you've had a little think about it. What's your first turning point?
Well, my first turning point probably came when I was 19 years old. As a kid growing up, all I ever wanted to do was play cricket. I wanted to play as many sports as possible. I'd throw my hand at everything, but cricket was always the one that was most important to me and the one that I really loved and enjoyed. So me and my brother we'd be playing test matches, whether it be in the garden, on the driveway, wherever we could find space, a local cricket club. We'd go and watch my dad on a Saturday throughout the summer, and that's how we spent our summer holidays. We'd be at the club playing. I think one of my greatest strengths as a very young kid was just pure naivety, and at no stage did I ever think I was ever going to do anything other than play professional cricket. That obviously happens to be 19 years old. I managed to get in the Yorkshire system and things sort of go quite smoothly for me. I think we all know in sport in particular, you need a little bit of luck, and people saw how I played. They liked the look of it. I had interest from my Yorkshire batting coach, Kevin Sharp, from a young age, and got exposed to first team training at 12, 13 years old, which was very rare, and felt incredibly lucky to get that opportunity. But it got to under 19s, and I was someone that was always a lot smaller than the rest of my age. Finally, at 19, I grew about 6 inches in a very short space of time. And how I'd always batted and how I'd always approached my stance, everything had changed because I got longer. I couldn't stand how I'd always stood. I had to completely remodel my technique and everything that I'd ever learned to do. Coincided with getting my first professional contract, trying to break in the Yorkshire first team. I think that created quite a lot of anxiety for me, a lot of fear about I've worked my whole life to get to this position, and straight away before I've even got near the first team, I'm having to completely remodel my whole game. So I think that hit me quite hard. And luckily I had a very wise head in Kevin Sharp as a batting coach who was like, this is okay. In many ways, this will be a really rewarding and helpful moment within your career that you'll be able to refer back to when you come out the other side of it. And it did take probably 6 months, pretty much that whole season, to get somewhere with it. It's so easy to live on autopilot and just let instincts take over, but the fact that I had to go and revisit different areas of my game gave me a real good understanding of how everything worked, how I wanted to put things together, and gave me almost this tool of being able to self-coach. The bit that was a little bit harder to manage, and I think where he was such a brilliant coach, was he didn't just help me from a technical point of view and from a physical point of view, but mentally being able to understand the challenges that come with that, learning to be patient, understanding it's a process. You know, a young enthusiastic kid, trying to get them to understand that this isn't something that you can just flick a switch and it'll change. It's quite impressive, really. I think the fact that I was exposed to that so early on was a really important part of my journey, and the reason why later down the line I was able to handle different moments better.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting thing, isn't it? That until you have failure, you don't have any reference point for failure, right? We were talking earlier, like as a young kid, everyone's calling you FEC, future England captain, whatever. There was obviously a certain amount of expectation on your shoulders that, oh, Joe Root, he's a gun, he's going to go on and play professional cricket, and everything kind of went your way. And so until you hit that first roadblock, you have no mechanism to deal with failure at all. And I suppose that was why it's so powerful for you, A, because you realised you had to adapt your game, but also probably coming through that, you realise, okay, if I have failure again, it's okay. Like I know that I can come out the other side of it.
As you know, we are, as batters within cricket, you are playing a game of failure. I reckon the best players that have ever played, take Sachin Tendulkar, 200 test matches, averaged 50, got 50 test hundreds, say, let's for argument's sake, 400 innings. Obviously, it depends how you measure success, but just as a broad line, that just shows you the greatest of all time is a 10% success rate. That's not a high number. So if you can't deal with failure, then you're not going to survive in that environment very long. Clearly, it helps you playing a team game where you're relying on other players as well, and your good days don't have to just be about you. It's important to celebrate those guys around you and maximise that. But if you can't handle the fact that you're going to get things wrong a lot of the time, it's not a very fun or forgiving existence.
It's like an early grounding in it, isn't it? In a way, that first instance of it, everything's gone quite smoothly, and then your body changes faster than your mind, effectively. What was that? You've been on the inside of that. What was that like?
Well, I think whenever you're experiencing something for the first time, it's the element of unknown. I'm someone that likes to plan well, be very well prepared. In my cricket, I'm a little bit disorganised in the rest of my life, but from that side of things, I've always felt like I've had a real sense of control in how I wanted to deliver things and how things operated within my game. And that was just taken away from me. That was the hardest thing for me to comprehend and sort of get my head around.
What did it teach you more broadly then around navigating those moments of uncertainty or a lack of control or those kind of things?
I think one thing it taught me is there's not one way to do things. To be successful, I was going to have to be adaptable, and I was going to have to be open to experimenting with things and seeing what worked and what didn't. I think once I learned that was going to have to be a big part of how I operated, it helped me really start to see big improvements within my game. And it's something that I've always tried to hold on to throughout my whole career, is that as soon as you sort of feel like you stand still, there's so much information and knowledge around the game now, whether it be analysis, trends and stats, that people can work you out quite quickly. If there's any sort of trends, they're straight onto it, opposition teams. And if you're not looking to constantly evolve and find ways of staying ahead of the curve, then very quickly that can become an issue. So being okay with trying it and being able to say, no, that doesn't quite work for me, but let's try something else. I think that's been a real help in experiencing that from such an early stage of my career.
Just interested to go back to the sort of psychology of that, Mo, and you said Kevin Sharp was helping you on the technique, but also the psychology. I mean, when we see the sort of Sky Sports commentators talking about someone's technique and they're falling over the ball or whatever, that's the obvious thing that everyone can see. What you can't see is what's going on in someone's mind, and that lack of confidence that comes, and the lack of self-belief and the questioning. And sometimes you're thinking, am I ever going to get through this run of bad form? I mean, you did come through it, and I bet there've been other players that were probably nearly as good as you that never found a way through that. Like what was different about you, do you think, that allowed you to get through that? to some of the other players that maybe didn't?
I mentioned Kevin Sharp. He was huge in my development, but his patience with me. He explained that this is a journey. This isn't, you're not playing from paycheck to paycheck here. This is about an evolution in your game and making sure that over time we've created a really strong base to work from, and we slowly put those blocks in place to get you to a position where you can be consistent within your performance. And if you build the consistency in how you approach these difficult moments, that framework will translate onto how you perform out on the field and will help you be consistent with your performances. And if you can learn to manage this now at this early stage, then when you get those difficult moments further down the line, that dip in form or that struggle, hopefully we can catch it that bit earlier. And it's not something that you have to spend 6 months on. It might be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Obviously things aren't always going to be perfect, but you can catch it that bit earlier and it feels like there's a bit more consistency in your performance. But behind that has to live consistency in the other ways you operate and the way that you go about everything, whether that's training, whether that's the way you are around the team. He had this phrase which was the good Lord's testing you. Not that he was like massively religious or anything, but if there was ever a moment where further down my career that I was going through something very similar, he would send me that text message straight away, the good Lord's just testing you. And it took me straight back to all of the stuff that we'd worked on, and very quickly like, right, okay, this is the sort of process that I might need to go to, and hopefully we don't live in that sort of phase for as long. He just had a brilliant way about bringing you back to, and it's okay to not get it right, and it's okay that you're going to have these moments, so let's get to work on getting you back to where you need to.
And probably in hindsight, it was, I suppose, a real benefit you going through this patch early in your career before you were playing in the first team or playing for England. I mean, I always think back to someone like Mark Ramprakash, who just had this extraordinary run into the England team and then suddenly failed for the first time in the bright lights with cameras on him and people talking about his technique. To take on all of that alongside just your own personal journey must have been incredibly hard for him. So that, in some ways, that was a benefit for you, right?
Absolutely. And in an era as well, Mark Ramprakash playing in an era where there wasn't any patience at all. If you had 2 or 3 games, you were out and you had to start all over again. But I think that's where I mentioned a little bit of luck, and you have to ride that wave every now and again. I had a lot of patience with the way I played. I was always someone very small, so I had to develop the power side of my game at a completely different rate and a different time to everyone else. But again, from a mental point of view, I knew that was going to come further down the line. And it meant that I had to work and find other ways of manipulating the ball, scoring in different areas. And by the time that side of my game caught up with everyone else, I'd learnt these other skills that really held me in good stead. It's worth putting that work in now, even if you don't necessarily see it right at the start of it.
Yeah. And actually, just one thing before we go to your second turning point, you naturally are quite contained and composed and philosophical and don't get too up and down. I mean, there are plenty of cricketers that do ride that emotional roller coaster much more, and that can work in your favour, definitely, because you sort of tap into the mood of the crowd and the environment, but it can also work against you. And I think the time being emotional works most against you in cricket is when you're out of form, because you feel really low at the best of times when you're out of form. And if your natural instinct is to go even lower, that makes it really difficult. So I'm just wondering, when you look back, I mean, do you sense that your sort of natural temperament has really helped you in those moments?
It has had a big impact, definitely. Trying to stay composed and trying to be quite realist about everything. Trying not to be too emotional in the decisions that you make. I think they're always going to be there. They're always going to be heightened in those big moments. And every team needs different characters and you need different personalities. But that just wouldn't be me. I wouldn't have been genuine to myself. I suppose that way of thinking has always helped me understand that without DRS and stuff at the start of your career, understanding that you might have a 4-week period where you don't get any runs, but you've had 2 bad decisions from an umpire, you've had 1 really good ball and an amazing catch. And actually, when you look at it, you might not have scored many runs, but you've not done a huge amount wrong.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean you're in bad form. You just need to keep working it. And there'll be other times when there are technical flaws within your game and you have to intervene and you have to think, well, what do I need to do to get this right?
Such a lovely description of a contained mindset, that almost not getting too low when the results aren't going your way. If you could be doing everything right, and let's keep steady and stable, not getting too high when things are going great, because you could be little flaws or little areas in your game you want to improve, but the results just look exceptional. It's not as good as you lot think. It's not as bad as you lot think. It is what it is, effectively.
Yeah, but and also not completely disregarding emotion. I think sometimes it's really important to harness it and use it. And even if you're at the bottom and you're frustrated, having that feeling of and remembering what that feels like when you are playing well, that's a really important thing to remember. And having that sort of motivation and drive from disappointment can be really beneficial. And also understanding, like, this feels amazing. How can I make sure I don't get sort of content with where I am, but how can I now take this further? How can I now make this even better than where I am currently?
Being deliberate with it.
Yeah.
Like, almost like channeling that for good and make sure we don't fall into the trap of the other side of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so Ruti, you had that initial sort of failure you had to learn from. You then had a very sort of meteoric rise through the Yorkshire ranks and into the England cricket team. Talk us through your second turning point.
Yeah, well, a lot of that came, thankfully, from you retiring, so I appreciate that. But no, I had a good start to my first-class career. I had a good, strong season. Then came my second big chunk of luck, which was Graham Thorpe seeing something in my game and investing a lot of time and opportunities in me. Very quickly got put on a Lions tour where I met you for the first time, and really had to learn to deal with a completely new set of conditions and circumstances, which was playing in the subcontinent, which was hugely beneficial for me. Playing in those conditions was a real eye-opener for me, and something that I tried to really sponge in as much as possible, find different bits that would work with my game and how I wanted to operate, and then managed to sort of follow that up in my second season. And off the back of that, I got selected on the tour to India, which was a really surreal experience. I remember getting to the airport and I got my suit for the first time and was really excited to enjoy my first England blazer, and realised that they'd got the sizes wrong and I was wearing Chris Tremlett's blazer. So very quickly it was like bang, straight back down to earth. And Graham Swan's first interaction with me, I'd never met before, obviously a big hero of mine, was him just wearing himself with laughter. But no, in many ways that helped integrate me into the team as almost like the baby, the cheeky little teenager that had somehow won a competition to be the mascot, and had to sort of prove everyone that I was actually here for a reason. But yeah, things went well from that point on. I had a good start to my international career. We won the Ashes the following season, and we got to the final of the Champions Trophy. And I think in many ways we sort of kidded ourselves to be somewhere that we actually weren't as a team. And then we got hit by this train in Australia and lost 5-0. And within that series, I ended up losing my spot in the team in the fourth test match. I had to sit and watch and carry the drinks in the fifth game. And I couldn't really understand in how such a short space of time I'd gone from being quite consistent and performing so well to not. And it took me actually having to take that bad news and understand that I was outside the team now. And as I look back on it, the majority of the time that I'd been practicing on that tour, I was working on areas of my game that I thought needed to brush up, and completely neglecting all of the strengths that had served me so well for the phase leading into it. I let too much external noise in. I was listening to what I thought were experienced pundits showing sort of gaps in my game and weaknesses, and then I was just throwing all of my time into trying to upskill in those areas, which meant that when I was getting opportunities to score and the areas that I'd be able to pick bowlers apart with, I wasn't ready for them, and I was building more and more pressure on myself in those big moments of games because I wasn't allowing myself to maximise my strengths, and that was one thing that I look back on now. I'm so glad that I did in that phase with, right, what are my strengths, and then just making them as good as I possibly can do, and slowly but surely in the background chipping away at the areas that I needed to improve, but making sure first and foremost that my super strengths, if you like, were at the top of my game, so that when I had my chances to put pressure back on opposition, I was ready for it.
It's so tempting though, isn't it? When you want to improve, you want to kind of get better at something. The natural place to focus is on where we're getting kind of B's and C's rather than the A's. But then counterintuitively, the area for most growth and most potential is in something we're already really good at. Potential to be great at.
And I think it's interesting. I mean, that book, Golf is not a game of perfect. Cricket's not a game of perfect either. You don't have to be brilliant at everything. I always think Cookie's a great example of that. He had his game, he had his methods of scoring, and what Cookie was brilliant at was just committing to that. He didn't get out of his bubble, not being a great driver through extra cover or whatever. But it takes a lot of confidence just to believe in yourself and not listen to that external noise, right?
Absolutely it does. But it's not always important what that external world thinks. It's the people that see you play every day, and your own mind and your own eyes are really important. No one knows you better than yourself. So I think experiencing that at 22 years old, 23 years old, was that step back, which sort of says, well, I don't want to feel this again. So like, let's get to work with it and let's enjoy the process of building yourself back up again.
It's such a balance though, isn't it? Like, you know, the idea of you want to take on advice. You want to kind of listen to, we were speaking to Phil Jansen on a recent podcast, and he was saying, you know, why wouldn't you listen to everyone's advice? But often that advice, you know, in your context can be contradictory. And so making sure we get a balanced perspective on that advice. And I guess in the same way with the strengths, it's not about neglecting weaknesses, but it's also not about trying to erase them. It's accepting them for what they are, I guess.
Absolutely. And can you be good enough to minimize having to use them? For example, as a cricketer, if you've got an issue with LBW, can you find somewhere to stand where that mode of dismissal is eradicated from the game? So there are other areas where you might not have to change something technically by where you stand or how you tactically position yourself. You can manage the game better. And being brave enough to take that on in a big moment. Obviously, you put the work in, you practice it, you understand what that looks like in a low pressure environment. But then when it really matters, can I go, yeah, I've done the work here, I trust this, I'm ready to take this out there and put it under real stress.
Just one more question about that turning point, because I was similarly dropped from the England cricket team in 2007. I remember the bowling coach at the time, Otis Gibson, coming out with that immortal phrase, don't get bitter, get better. But I couldn't help feeling quite bitter, actually, because I was like, well, I've done a lot of great things for England. I've scored a load of hundreds, we've won Ashes series, blah, blah, blah. Literally a few bad games, I'm suddenly out of the team. Like, that doesn't feel fair to me. So my question to you is, at that time, did you feel bitter about it? Did you feel like that was unfair that you were dropped out of the team? But also, maybe were you able to use that emotion as a way of driving you to improve?
Yeah, I was bitterly disappointed. I mean, I remember Cookie, when he told me that I wasn't playing, he was like, this might not make much sense to you. You've scored more runs than I have on this tour, but you're going to miss out this game. Clearly, I was very disappointed and upset about it, but it was also at the hand of one of my good friends getting an opportunity to play Test cricket for the first time. I didn't want to ruin his experience. We'd been through the Yorkshire Academy together, we've been on similar journeys. You see each other's difficult moments and high points, and I might be disappointed, and I'll deal with that in my own way, but at no point is that going to get in the way of it being a really big and special week for him. And I couldn't get too down on myself because there was something else at play here. You know, it didn't mean it didn't hurt any less. It was also within a series where everything went wrong. You know, we were 4-0 down at that moment. No one was performing. You know, people were retiring. People were falling out. You know, we were about to go into a really big moment in English Test cricket history. In this former #1 team in the world with all these superstars is about to sort of come to the end of its journey. I didn't really know that at the time. I didn't really understand that was the case. So there was a lot of people feeling what I was feeling. And it was just making sure that, in many ways, you were just trying to make sure that the train didn't derail. And which is a really bad place to be, isn't it? As a high-performing team, if you're thinking about getting through the rest of the series, not winning and being at your peak of performance. But it was hard just to focus on yourself. There was a lot of other things that you had to be aware of and contend with and navigate through.
And I suppose, I mean, I think I was commentating on that series, there was no one that really thought, well, Joe Root's not going to play for England again. I think it was a bit of a fallout, as you say, from everything. There's probably a thought around, actually, he just needs to come out of the firing line for a moment and he'll come back in. You obviously did come out of the firing line, you did come back in very quickly, continued this sort of very good run of consistent form post that, which leads us to your third turning point, which is becoming England captain.
Yeah, I mean, it probably came at me a little bit sooner than I was ready for. Not that you're ever really ready for that position. I think the one thing that's strange about cricket in comparison with other sports is the captain is quite a focal part of the team that makes big decisions that affect the outcome of games. You look at football and they're just a leader, aren't they? They're people you want to follow, whether it's by example or the way that they speak in the dressing room. Within cricket, there's a lot more to it. Now, I'd become quite senior within that group, but I had no experience really. I'd captained a handful of games for Yorkshire. You obviously might do it in junior cricket, but you're still learning the game at that point. So it was sort of going into this new role, but alongside all of that, and so it was something I was really excited about and wanted to give all of my energies and my best efforts towards. But it coincided with me and Carrie having our first child. For your whole life, you spend working towards this dream of playing international sport and playing cricket for England, and you manage to live it out and you can throw everything at that. But nothing can sort of prepare you for having kids and the love and the feelings that you have towards that. And all of a sudden, this thing that I'd worked towards for my whole life was not the most important thing in my life anymore. And having to navigate all of the different emotions and feelings that come with being a father. You know, I remember 4 days after his birth having to get on a flight to India and having 6 weeks or 5 weeks of a tour out there, and you feel bad on your on your wife having to go through all that on her own. And well, thankfully we had family and stuff support around it, but they're all big moments that you can never get back, and you're sort of trying to navigate your feelings in that space. And it did take me about a year and a half to find a way to manage that better, and for them to be able to coexist and that be okay. And actually, I can leave cricket at the door. I don't have to bring it home all the time. And when I am at home, I just want to make sure that I am present and I am giving what I want to give to my family, and trying to make sure that you plan well and that you never spend more, or we try and we don't spend more than 4 or 5 weeks apart at any stage, even if tours are long. I don't want to miss them growing up. I don't want them to feel like they haven't got a present dad that wants to be involved in their lives, and make sure that you can coexist the two together. I don't think I've always got it right, especially towards the back of my captaincy. I was coming home, I was bringing everything with me, all the baggage that came with it, and I wasn't present. And I can vividly remember after my last tour as captain, I was sat playing a ball game with my son, and he was talking to me, and I wasn't really listening. And I thought, this is not who I want to be anymore. I don't want to be that dad that is there, but he's not. He's just the ghost of, or a shell of a human that is just sort of on autopilot. So I'm glad that I've got to a stage now where I seem to manage it a lot better, and clearly it's not always perfect, but it's certainly much better than it was.
How do you do that then? Because it's, like you say, it's easy to fall into that trap of being there in body, maybe not in mind. Like, how have you kind of mentally positioned that after that?
Like with many things, is by getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and understanding what it looks like when it's not right. And I'm very fortunate. I have a very patient wife that understands it, and making sure when the opportunities are there, getting them to come out, and also understand that it's great for them to experience different parts of the world, go and experience the culture of India and the love of cricket that they have there, the lifestyle that you get to live in Australia, all these great places we get to tour. And there are so many great things that come with it, and you want to give your kids those experiences. There is a demand there, and I think it's trying to remember how enjoyable those moments are, and that you never get them back. And even if it does feel like hard work at the time, in 10 years time, it's they're the moments that you're going to miss.
In the early days, there was that sort of external perspective or perception that if the wives and girlfriends and families were on tour, they were somehow a distraction to the players. And if you're playing for cricket for England, the only thing you should be focused on is the cricket, and having to have conversations about nappies and things like that was taking your mind off your cricket. But the truth is, actually, that allows you to play cricket better, doesn't it? Because it does give you that perspective.
But it certainly does for me, and I think for a lot of the current team, it's very easy to put cricket on this pedestal. You want to normalise it as much as you can and make it not feel like you're constantly having to outperform your best. The more you can bring it down to a level where it's okay for you to come home and say, all right, I've got bedtime story, bath time, whatever it is. That is your real life. That's what's going to be there at the end of your career and for many years to come. That's kind of what you do it all for, right?
It's a broader identity as well, isn't it? A broader sense of self beyond, I am a cricketer, that's what I do, that's how I judge myself. Not everything is defined by a result.
Yeah.
I guess it's not to diminish its importance, it's just saying it sits in a context.
And also, I think I look at the most successful teams and the most enjoyable teams that I've played in. They are almost like an extended family. It's not like a holiday. I don't choose to go on to these places with these people, but the relationships and the friends that you make throughout that journey, and if you can create a really good family environment and bring in everyone else's extended family, I think that makes you an even stronger and tighter-knit unit. If you've got experiences away from the game with each other, in those pressure moments, and you've got that in the bank, and you need to throw complete trust to one of your teammates, and you've got that deep connection, I think that's quite powerful as well.
Ruti, how do you organise your time away from cricket? Because people probably don't realise that when England aren't playing, you're still going to be very busy with endorsement appearances and charity stuff. And, you probably have to go back and play for Yorkshire, and you want to probably do some technical work and whatnot. Like, have you got sort of hard and fast rules as to how you manage your time when you're off?
I do. As I say, I'm a lot more organised within my cricket than outside of it. And you want to give back as well if there are charity events that you feel passionately about. First and foremost, the one thing I want to make sure is that I want to be at home and I want to do all normal things, like take the kids on a school run and do the after school clubs. And after about a week or so, you sort of regret saying this, but like do the dishwasher or, make the beds, and being able to just say, right, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to throw absolutely everything into just being a present husband and father. Because in many ways, we're quite lucky in that respect. There are a number of dads and parents out there that I have to work from Monday to Friday, and they only really get the weekends.
Hi there. Hope you're enjoying the episode. We know people power performance. When you unlock their potential, everything changes. That's why we built Mindflick, a SaaS solution where performance psychology meets innovative technology. Trusted by the best in sport and business, Mindflick transforms self-awareness into high-impact performance. We give you the tools to move from insight to action, creating results you can measure. If you're ready to elevate your leaders, empower your teams, and fuel your organization's growth, find out more at mindflick.co.uk and start your journey today. Now, back to the episode.
Okay, so let's move forward to the fourth turning point. I'm just going to leave it to you. The fourth turning point is you stepping down as England captain. Do you want us to just give a bit of background to why that was so significant for you?
Yeah, it was obviously it's a big part of my life for 4.5, 5 years. That was, you almost feel like you've reached the pinnacle of your sport, and you sort of think, well, where is there to go from here? There's not many players and ex-England captains that have much of a career after they finish playing, and I didn't feel like I was ready to finish. I felt like I had a lot more to give, but it was going to have to be in a completely different capacity. In many ways, one of the benefits for me was the fact that it was going to have to be a clean start. There was going to be a new director of cricket, there was going to be a new head coach, and clearly a new captain, which meant that I wouldn't be on my own in that respect of everyone was going to have to face something new, and for us to go in a completely new direction and buy into something completely different. It turns out it was quite extremely different in terms of how we look to play our cricket. And Rob Key came in as the director, Brendan McCullum as coach, and Ben Stokes who was vice captain of the team that I was in charge of. But the reason I really enjoyed him as vice captain and why he was so good at that role was because of how differently we saw the game and how we could bounce those ideas off each other. Clearly they came in and said, right, we're going to take this in a completely different direction. We want to be extremely aggressive, but their principles were very simple. It was a case of being able to put bowlers under pressure for long periods of time, but also being skillful enough to absorb it if the situation required it. A solution-based team looking for ways to take 20 wickets, whatever capacity that was, and chase every ball as hard as you can to the boundary. A very simple philosophy of playing, which I think was very refreshing and very uncomplicated at the highest level. I think is a really important thing to do, and it made it very easy for everyone to buy into. You knew what was required of you, knew what was asked of you. And I knew as a senior player within that team who was a previous leader, I had in many ways the opportunity to derail this if I wanted to, and be awkward and be difficult, or I could champion this, get behind it and make a real statement of this is how we want to do, this is how we want to live, this is how I want to play our cricket moving forward. It could be really powerful if I really went 100% for this. And Ben is someone that, as my vice captain, he'd throw everything he could into every moment. He would give his absolute all, and it was as a feeling inside me that it was right, now is my time to do that in my own way back for him. And if it means being slightly more aggressive, and if it means playing the game slightly differently to how I had been, to sort of make that point really resonate with the rest of the team, then I was quite willing to take that on. I had to be quite careful. I'd just had the best 2 years of my career in terms of my own batting, but that also coincided with probably the worst run we'd had as a team. So that was not the answer, was for me to just worry about myself. It's like, how do I fit within this framework, and how do I make sure that you sort of speed up that process of getting with where you want to get to? And thankfully the results came pretty quickly, so it made that shift slightly quicker, and people realizing that this is something that can be sustainable if we fully buy into it and we live and die by it. One thing that I've really enjoyed about working alongside those two as leaders is I've always been very technically minded in how I see the game. I've always looked at how I can minimize risk and maximize scoring opportunity, but within a very technically minded way. So am I lined up right? Is my positioning good? Are my feet where they need to be? Is my head still? Dave come in, and I remember having a conversation with Brendan early on. I say I really struggling with this bowler. Very consistent, he always lands the ball in this area, feel quite vulnerable. And he said, if he lands the ball there every time, that makes it easier. You know where it's going to be. You go and stand somewhere else before he lets go of it. And it's like, well, that sounds like the most basic and stupid thing that how have I not even, you get so wrapped up in your own mind and the way you see things. Actually, situationally, that is the smart thing to do. You can then still play the same, but from a different starting point. One thing that he's been very good with me is just managing different scenarios and situations. And in many ways, is sort of adding an advance on how I saw the game before is, before facing the ball, before he's even let go of it, how can I bring things even more in my favour? How can I eliminate or eradicate as many modes of dismissal to allow me then to go and put pressure back on the bowler? And whether it actually be tactically taking a bigger risk early on in your innings and trying to get things more in your favour in terms of the fields that they might set, or not wanting to bowl that ball every time, finding a way of being at peace with it if it goes wrong. Those sort of moments have been really eye-opening for me, and at 32 years old have opened these doors that I didn't even think existed. Was, I think, really beneficial for me in terms of providing like that next stage of energy in my career and saying, well, there's still so much more for me to explore and discover, and there's all of this to look forward to and to be a part of. And within that framework, I know that I can add in this area here or in that area there, and still allows me to turn up to training with loads of enthusiasm and excitement of how can I get better today, which I think is a really important part of, you say staying consistent is having those same ambitions and that same feeling about what you do within the game.
Again, like the hallmark of a good coach often is to take something very complicated and give you that clarity. Just do this.
I also think, just on that, sorry to interrupt, but the beauty of that as well is the perception of it for each individual. You've got different characters and guys that see the game differently. It's very easy for that to resonate with them in their own way.
You were saying that the perception maybe outside is different to the reality kind of inside. That shift that has come in, is it a shift in, it doesn't sound like a technical shift. It sounds like maybe more of a mindset shift, or what is the shift that you've experienced?
One thing he's very, very good at, and what this coaching environment do very well, is strip as much pressure off you as possible. So you're trying to give guys to go out there and play with freedom. And I almost think the misconception is that's reckless. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's maximising your potential as an individual, and also being able to do that and dovetailing with the guys that you're playing with out there in the middle. So you look at someone like Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett, very different styles and techniques. One's 6'5", the other is not. But they score in different areas. One's right-handed, one's left-handed. One will hit the ball from the top of off stump through backward point for 4, the other one will hit it straight back down. So as a bowler, that's very difficult to contend with. There's a lot of change that goes on there. If you can rotate the strike well, if you're constantly moving the scoreboard on and you're finding ways to score quite freely, things can very quickly move in your direction and work out well. And that's probably why that over the last couple of years, they average 50 as an opening pair and become one of the most successful duos that England have ever produced at the top of the order. We've sort of tried to maximise the individuals that we have and elevate their games to the best. And with doing that, it's just coincided with us playing slightly more aggressively. Sometimes if it doesn't quite go right, it could look slightly different externally. It's not about going gung-ho, going, we're just going to throw all caution into. There's quite a lot of method behind what happens. There's more behind what we're trying to do. And this is what's going to bring the best out of us as a team.
And the other element in all of this that really resonates with me is when Brendan McCullum talks about, look, these guys, they're young men. This is a very short period of their lives. I want them to have good memories of this time. And so I'm just interested to know, how much is that a reality on the ground or just a soundbite? How do they get the balance right between it being relaxed, have a great time, but also being professional and making sure you're as prepared as you can be?
I think by being able to maximise the times when you're on, you might do the one less training day than we might have done 5 days. Having that extra day where you can get to know each other away from the cricket environment, take yourself one less day in the pressure cooker almost, and say, we're going to spend the same amount of time together, but we're going to do it in a different environment. I think that can be just as beneficial. A lot of the time when you're sat there and you're having serious conversations, whether it's about the opposition, whether it be about, technically how you're going to tackle different surfaces or conditions, it can sort of be very tiresome over a long period of time. If you can have that in a slightly more relaxed environment, you're more likely to get the information you need out of the rest of the guys, right? You're more likely to speak honestly, speak freely. And then when you do turn up to those training days, you can properly go at it, knowing that we've been allowed to relax or have a bit of time off, and know that we go into it having put the work in that we need to be ready. A lot of the work doesn't always have to happen at the ground, right? This is a game that is played in the mind as much as it is on the grass, and it's how can you make sure that you're not just physically and technically in a really good place, but you're also mentally sharp, you're mentally making good decisions for long periods of time. And that can sometimes be just by taking yourself out of that environment, giving yourself that extra day to relax and wind, or have those good honest conversations where you feel safer to actually explore where you're actually at.
I guess as well that time away from the sport as a group allows you to build the relationships that then we can use to have some of those really honest conversations. If we built that relationship on the golf course, then we can maybe use that relationship to disagree well. We don't take it as personally because we know that our relationship is beyond this disagreement, right?
Yeah, there's a time in New Zealand just gone where we ended up doing a 10K or 5K run, and you sort of go through that hardship together and you experience that. And I remember there was also a time where we were training, but me and Josh did some training at my local club. He came over and we did some short ball work. We soaked the AstroTurf and just peppered each other for a couple of hours ahead of an Ashes series. And then we lost a couple of quick wickets and me and him were batting in the middle, and we were like, wow, we've got this experience to fall back on. We've been here before in a strange way. And it was actually quite nice to normalize it and say, we've not just practiced this 2 days ago in a net and it all feel very sort of professional. We did this in a club net with 2 club teams training around us, and it was very relaxed and it was good fun, and it sort of like just de-stressed everything completely. It ended up working really well in our favour straight away. That heightened anxiety and meant that we were able to stay calm, think clearly and make good decisions.
Was it similar when you were captain, Strauss? Would you have that kind of freedom to go and do that kind of thing, or was it very structured?
I remember that Ashes tour in 2010-11 was the first tour that England players were ever allowed to take golf clubs on tour with them, because for that very reason we said, like, when our time's off, we've got to be able to get away from it all, refresh, not worry about what people might perceive is the right thing for us to be doing, just accept that it's on time and there's off time. But I think these guys are taking it to another level. And I think there's an interesting question there around the sort of rise in professionalism of sport and what that actually means, because you can drift very quickly to everything being measured, no time off, always have to be thinking about the game, this drive to be seen to be the perfect professional, and all the while it's just burning you out. And a lot of obviously the media and external people don't get it, and that's why getting that balance. You've obviously been involved in football with Pep. There has to be that balance, right?
Yeah, that balance. Remembering it's people, it's human beings underneath it all. And I think like you say, it's the external story that's told more often, and can we deal with that story being told? And results at the end of the day determine which version. Like you were saying, if we're losing, it'll probably get labelled as recklessness. If we're winning, it'll be lifted up as this fantastic philosophy that allows people to play with freedom and bring their strengths and so on. But the results, I guess, dictate that.
Yeah, and so you've got to ask yourself, what is the best way of getting the results, and then commit to it. Sometimes it's hard to remain committed when externally people are telling you you're doing the wrong thing, or you're getting negative press. But you know as well as I do, Ruti, like, if you buy into that, reacting to the external reaction to things, you just get nowhere.
Well, I know you're constantly chasing the game. You're not setting the parameters for people to follow. You feel like it's very reactive and you're already on the back foot before you've even started. And I've been there. I've gone that way, and I've made those mistakes. And I guess now as a senior player within the teams, that it's just trying to make sure that those guys around me and those decision makers aren't going to fall into the same trap. It's like, no, actually, if it doesn't go right, let's look at it more of a case of what were the reasons we ended up on the wrong side of this result. Was it because we just didn't commit, we didn't execute, or for whatever reason? Let's make sure we're a better version of this before we look to go away from that. And the majority of the time, that is the case, that you just either didn't execute well enough, you didn't commit entirely to what you said and you set out to do, and every now and again you're allowed to get outplayed as well.
The third point. Ruti, 2 more questions for you. The first one is about your own personal sort of drivers and ambitions moving forward. You've obviously achieved so much in the England cricket team. Everyone talks about Tendulkar's record as leading run scorer. I never sort of got the feeling that you're particularly motivated by those sort of milestones, but what are your ambitions moving forward into the sort of autumn of your career, I suppose?
Yeah, that's a very polite way of putting it. I think more than anything is just, it sounds pretty cheesy, but like, try and really enjoy the journey of it. Like, you only get so long and you get wrapped up chasing individual moments or individual series. One thing I would love to do is obviously go and give a good account of self in Australia. That would be really special, to go and achieve something as a group there. Most of the things I want to do would be a part of us winning as a group. I think they're the most fulfilling things. They're the things that really sit with you. And when I look back at my career to this day, the moments that are most enjoyable are those, whether it's a big series win or an amazing closely fought test match, winning the World Cup. It's the journey that you go on to get to those moments. It's not necessarily that 30 seconds of elation after Joss takes the bails there. the fact that we were on our knees in 2015 and in a 4-year period we were world champions, and every little part of that journey, they're going to different parts of the world and winning sort of everywhere and becoming number one, and all of the different highs and lows that you sort of wear together as a team. I've been very lucky to play in some very connected and harmonious teams, and not everyone can say that they've had that pleasure. It's one thing that you don't choose your family in many ways, and it's the case the same with sports teams, is you don't get to choose them. But I've been fortunate to make some brilliant friends throughout that, and with that some brilliant memories and moments that I'll remember for a long time. So clearly if you're performing well and you're scoring heavily, then you're giving your team a much better chance of performing those team goals and creating those moments and memories. So that's the main driver for me moving forward.
Yeah, well, I can categorically say those are the moments you miss the most. And as you say, it is not just the moment, it's the journey to get to those moments. We've just had a reunion for the 2005 Ashes team, and it was just such a special thing to be in each other's company again and reliving what was truly the best moments of our life, but get completely forgotten because life moves on as it always does. So yeah, you're absolutely on the right track in my opinion. The final question we asked to everyone, Ruti, which I'm sort of putting you on the spot here a little bit, but if there is one bit of your journey or the story that you've told today that you would think our listeners should take away with them, one piece of advice, what would it be, do you think?
I wish I'd spent more time thinking about this.
Yeah.
Whatever career it is that you might take on, whether it's a professional sport, if you're going to live with it, being genuine to yourself is so important. If you're constantly having to put on different masks and try and be something you're not, then it makes it very difficult to do. I talk about trying to be consistent, but I think that has to come from being genuine in how this is actually what I really believe. And the moments that I look back on my career, and I like to ask this question is, would you change anything about your career? I look back and think, yeah, I would. I'd change a lot of things, even though I've really enjoyed it and it's been amazing to this point. One of them would be not being as genuine as I could have been as England captain, and really sort of saying, no, this is what I truly believe at different times, and sort of being a bit stronger on those decisions. So I think being authentic to yourself, being genuine, and being able to find something that sits really comfortable with you and allows you to live and breathe that every day.
I really enjoyed something you said earlier though, which kind of speaks to that, I think, a little bit in terms of how then you have chosen to be, after you've stepped down from captain, you're such a leader in that team without necessarily being like the authority figure, the official one in the team. But that choice point is, it seems so genuine, so authentic to you to be a teammate like that can influence so many others as well.
Yeah, and I just feel like if the thing that's important to remember within team sport is that as big an impact as you could have individually, it's not about you. It's about getting a group of very different individuals with different sets of skills that see the game differently, all sort of working towards one common goal. The more that you can try and encourage the other guys around you to see that and live that and not get too internal and too obsessed with your own game, actually I think that can take pressure off yourself too. Because it isn't just about you. If there are ways that you can help the other guys around you, whether that's advice, whether that's sharing experiences, whether that's like, taking responsibility that might not be your fault in the media, and then, you're buying someone else a bit of time, then if you might have put the work in with one of the other batters and they go out and make a brilliant 100, and you knowing that you've been on that journey with them and you've aided them in that, and you can see them really enjoying that moment, that's really rewarding. So I think the most sustainable thing, the most rewarding thing, and the most beneficial thing for the group is to, what else can you do to bring the best out of the guys around you and get to where you want to get to as a team.
Very wise words. Just to wrap things up, Ruti, just a massive thank you for joining us on the podcast today. A massive thank you for all you've done in England's shirt so far, and also the way you've done it. And there's so many people out there, you know what an opportunity you have as an England player to set the right example, and you've definitely done that. And of course, from all of us at Mindflick and for all our listeners, all the best for this winter and beyond.
Cheers, thank you very much, thanks for having me.